Wednesday, January 27th. I'm Aryeh O'Sullivan, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu lashed out at UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, accusing him of supporting Palestinian terror. The latest war of words came after the UN chief, while denouncing terror, suggested Israel's occupation spurred Palestinians to commit attacks. He also slammed Israel's settlement activities, calling them proactive acts.
Stabbings, vehicle attacks, and shootings by Palestinians targeting Israeli civilians, all of which I condemn, and clashes between Palestinians and Israeli security forces have continued to claim lives. But security measures alone will not stop the violence. They cannot address the profound sense of alienation and despair driving some Palestinians, especially young people. The full force of the law must be brought to bear on all those committing crimes, with a system of justice applied equally for Israelis and Palestinians alike. Continued settlement activities are an affront to the Palestinian people and to the international community. They rightly raise fundamental questions about Israel's commitment to a two-state solution.
In a quick response to Ban Ki-moon, Netanyahu accused the UN body of losing its neutrality, saying there is no justification for terror. Palestinian terrorists don't want to build a state, they want to destroy a state. They don't murder for peace, and they don't murder for human rights. The Prime Minister went on to say that Ban Ki-moon's remarks do nothing to improve the situation. Debate continued in the UN Security Council, where Israeli settlement activity was also scrutinized by the U.S. ambassador to the UN and the Palestinian delegate. Israel's ambassador, Danny Danon, confronted the statements and tried to defend Israel's state policies.
The United States strongly opposes settlement activity, including some steps Israel has taken this month. We are deeply concerned about reports of a declaration of more than 370 acres in the Jordan Valley in the West Bank as state land. We are also deeply concerned about recent steps that appear to have effectively created a new settlement south of Gush Etzion.
We are all aware that the Israeli settlement enterprise, in all its manifestation, is the most formidable obstacle to the peace we seek. While we appreciate the strong positions expressed by all Security Council members and the international community at large against Israeli settlement activities, these positions must be translated into action.
Not once were the lives of Israelis murdered by terrorists recognized by the Council. No condemnation, no expression of solidarity, not even a statement of concern. The facts don't lie. The Security Council has been hypocritical when it comes to Israel. The road to peace is long and difficult, but Israel is committed to make every effort.
Nashat Milhem, the terrorist who murdered 3 people in Tel Aviv on January 1st, planned to wage additional attacks, either in Afula or at an army training base in the center of the country. Details released by the Shin Bet today for publication revealed information retrieved from Milhem's cell phone, which he ditched when he fled Tel Aviv. Video recordings from his phone showed him drinking and taking drugs and expressing his hate for Jews and Christians, whom he called enemies of Islam. In a related development, indictments were issued today against 3 suspects, residents of Arara, who are suspected of aiding Milhem. The men, 2 of whom are Milhem's cousins and a friend of theirs, confessed to assisting the terrorists in hiding out. It was also revealed that 2 women had apparently notified police that they spotted Milhem as he fled north, but the police did not take their calls seriously. IDF soldiers and engineering units have mapped out the homes of 2 terrorists who fatally stabbed Shlomit Kriegman and injured Adina Cohen when they infiltrated the Beit Horon settlement Monday night. The 2 terrorists, 23-year-old Ibrahim Alan of Beit Uel Takhta, west of Ramallah, and 17-year-old Hussein Abu Rosh of the Kalandia refugee camp north of Jerusalem, were shot dead by a security guard when they attempted to flee the settlement. The houses are expected to be demolished in the coming days. The likelihood of Israel engaging in a war in the coming year remains low. However, IDF officials warned that any escalation along Israel's northern and southern borders could trigger a major conflict. More in this report from IBA's Margo Dudkevich.
Hezbollah has turned many of its Shiite villages in southern Lebanon into massive military strongholds, continues to invest in missile accuracy and warhead size. Its main focus is subterranean warfare, digging tunnels under Lebanese villages with the aim of moving the battlefront to Israeli soil in the next conflict. Israel estimates the terrorist organization has an arsenal of some 100,000 short-range rockets, several thousand missiles capable of hitting central Israel, and others capable of hitting anywhere across the entire country. Intensively involved in fighting in Syria, where it's lost over 1,300 of its fighters, IDF officials doubt the terror organization is likely to push for a renewed conflict with Israel in 2016. While there is a high potential for escalation in Judea and Samaria, IDF officials noted that despite the recent wave of deadly terror attacks in the settlements, the number of attacks and scope of clashes are on the decline. Describing the situation as volatile, officials say it depends on the continued security coordination between Israel and the PA, the economic situation in the West Bank. According to the officials, there are a lot of weapons in the field that have not yet been used, but noted that in some Palestinian villages, locals try to prevent youth from leaving to perpetrate attacks. Easing up restrictions could have a calming effect and ease the tensions, officials said. Turning to the south and the Gaza border, where despite sporadic rocket fire directed at Israel, Hamas is taking advantage of the relative calm to prepare for the next round of hostilities, digging tunnels, training fighters and strengthening its rocket capability. Southern Command officials noted that the wet weather conditions provide a perfect cover for terrorists to build tunnels, but at the same time could cause their collapse. Last night, at least 7 Hamas operatives were killed when the tunnel they were constructing caved in. During Operation Protective Edge in Gaza in 2014, security forces destroyed some 30 tunnels constructed by Hamas. IDF officials say they are confident that at some point in time, the Islamic State will eventually move against Israel, and have not ruled out the possibility that hostilities with the jihadi group will occur. Margot Dudkevich, IBA News.
Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon accused the Turkish government of not doing enough to fight against terror. He also said he hopes Ankara will put an end to funding the Islamic State in exchange for receiving oil. Ya'alon made the comments at a press conference with his Greek counterpart in Athens yesterday. In recent weeks, reports suggest that efforts are underway to repair ties between Turkey and Israel, and it is unclear whether Ya'alon's comments will undermine those attempts.
Now, it's up to Turkey, the Turkish government, the Turkish leadership, to decide whether they want to be part of any kind of cooperation in fighting terrorism. This is not the case so far. As you probably know, Daesh enjoyed Turkish money for oil for a very, very long period of time. I hope that it will be ended. Turkey allowed the jihadists to move from Europe to Syria and Iraq and back home as part of the Daesh terror infrastructure in Europe. I hope that it is going to be ended. And Turkey still hosts the Hamas external terror headquarters in Istanbul. If all those phenomena are going to be ended, and Turkey will be ready to rehabilitate the relationship with us.
Jewish communities across the globe are commemorating International Holocaust Day with ceremonies coinciding with the 71st anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. Here at home, Prime Minister Netanyahu hosted Holocaust survivors, where he stressed that now, during this time of rising anti-Semitism, it was even more important to preserve the memory of the Holocaust.
And elsewhere.
U.S.
Jews
President
are once
Barack
again being
Obama will
targeted.
attend a ceremony at Israel's embassy in Washington honoring 4 righteous Gentiles who risked their lives to save Jews in the Holocaust. Separate events are scheduled to take place at the United Nations complex in New York and UNESCO headquarters in Paris.
It is commemorations like this that remind us all where the oldest and most enduring hatred can lead. Unfortunately, in Europe and elsewhere, Jews are once again being targeted just for being Jews. Around the world, Jewish communities are increasingly living in fear. We see anti-Semitism directed against individual Jews, and we also see this hatred directed against the collective Jew, against the Jewish state. Israel is targeted with the same slurs and the same libels that were leveled against the Jewish people since time immemorial. Islamic extremists incorporate the most outrageous anti-Semitism into their murderous doctrines. We see this in Gaza, we see it in Raqqa, we see it in Tehran. And it's not just Islamic extremists in the Middle East and Europe. Even respected Western opinion leaders have become afflicted with hatred for the Jewish people and the Jewish state.
Marking International Holocaust Remembrance Day in Jerusalem, President Reuven Rivlin hosted key players in the Mossad operation that led to the capture in 1961 of Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann. Eichmann, who was captured by Mossad agents in Argentina, was brought to Israel to stand trial and sentenced to death in May 1962. Documents related to the Eichmann trial were on display for the first time at the president's residence, including letters from Eichmann asking former President Yitzhak Ben-Zvi for clemency, and the latter's refusal. Well, joining me now in the studio to discuss growing anti-Semitism worldwide, as well as other developments in the region, is former ambassador to Sweden and Egypt, Tzvi Mazel. Tzvi, thanks for joining us. Ambassador, we're here on International Holocaust Memorial Day, and as we heard the Prime Minister say, Jews are still being singled out for being Jews. You were the ambassador in Europe and elsewhere. Do you think that's true?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And anti-Semitism has become more important than it used to be in the last 20, 30 years. It was even very difficult for the Israeli delegation, the United Nations, to get the United Nations General Assembly vote to fix the 27th of January as the Remembrance Day of the Shoah. It's being now celebrated, not celebrated, marked everywhere in the world, and it's very good because we should remember and we should analyze what happened. But the problem is that now we have to see forward because anti-Semitism has become really terrible. It's now the main forces of anti-Semitism stem from Islam, from Muslim minority in Europe, and from Muslim countries, from Muslim media. And that problem, it's a terrible problem. It's not being tackled by the world, especially not by Europe. That's the problem. You see, as far as Europe is concerned, the Muslims, Arabs are third world people, persecuted, very weak, so they cannot be admonished, they cannot be spoken to. Everything that those people say, it's okay, it's being accepted. Not, absolutely. There is a lot of words said by all the leaders of Europe, as Cameroon in Britain, François Hollande, Juncker, the president of the European Commission, they say it's impossible that there is still anti-Semitism in Europe. And Juncker, the head of the Commission, said today that he cannot accept that a rabbi in Marseille would say that Jews must remove kippah. But they do nothing. They do absolutely nothing because they have to fight the right objective, and the right objective is Muslim minorities in Europe, and that's bad, very, very bad.
Talking about the Muslim minorities coming in, there's been millions, or about 1 million asylum seekers coming to Europe, and how important is it to impart the lessons of the Holocaust now in this situation?
It's very, very important, but when Arab Muslim young people go to school in Europe, when it comes to teach the Shoah, they stand up, pupils of 12 years old, they say, no, we don't accept it, absolutely. You cannot teach Shoah because this is Jewish, it's terrible, the Jews are against the Arabs, so you can't accept it. And in many places in Europe, and when I was in Sweden, in the beginning of the 2000s, they stopped teaching Shoah in many, many schools.
So you, as ambassador, you even detected then that there was growing anti-Semitism?
Yes, at that time, because teachers, Swedish teachers, Christian, not Jews, came to the embassy and told me, listen, we cannot anymore teach the Shoah. We go to our Ministry of Education in Sweden, in Stockholm, to our government, and they say nothing. They don't react. So there is Europe has a problem. I'll say something more. According to all polls in the last 10-15 years, 40% of European in Western Europe, Eastern Europe, EU, European Union, have declared themselves admitted that they were still anti-Semite. 40%. It means 140 million people of Western Europe admit that they are anti-Semite.
That's
so it's a problem
concerning.
71 years after Shoah, and still it exists, and nobody really does something very serious against it.
That's a very sad situation. Now,
Yeah.
let's look at the other incident we want to talk about. It's Egypt. You were the ambassador to Egypt.
Yeah.
And this week we're marking 5 years from the uprising. Do you think that Egypt today is more democratic?
Yes, absolutely. I know it's against many people, especially the MSM. MSM is mainstream media, as we know. New York Times, Le Monde, Douglas Nieto, Corriere della Sera. You know, those journalists are very pure people. They think that Egypt should have been democratic one day after the fall of Mubarak. The problem is that between Egypt and human rights, there are 1400 of Islam. And then in Islam, there are no human rights. It doesn't exist. There are the Sharia, the laws of Allah, and Islam means submission of the Muslim to God through the Sharia. But according to Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, who is doing a wonderful job on the economic level, he said, we cannot impose democracy in one day on Egypt or in other Muslim countries. We need two things: education, and economic growth. When it will go, it will be a kind of sustainable, going every year more and more, then democracy will come gradually. And this is what he's doing now. Only 2 days ago, when he celebrated on the 25th, the day of 5 years, he said, listen, we cannot impose, it's impossible. Be patient. I'm doing now, this is what he said, what can be done for Egypt on the economic level. And he achieved something very, very important. In 2015, that just finished, the economic growth in Egypt was 4.2%. It's wonderful. Next year, he foresees 5.5%. The problem is that he needs 7% a year for 10 years. And it's very difficult. He needs technology. He needs money, investment. He needs also the assistance of the United States and Europe, and they don't give him, because he's considered as a man who ousted a democratically elected president, Morsi, which is Muslim Brothers, which is the mother and the father of all terrorist organizations in the Middle East. So we have a problem. We have a problem with the United States, with Europe, with the media, and there are two important countries, Israel and Egypt, that are fighting radical Islam, and they are not being held. Absolutely not assistant. We are alone. It's very bad. One more thing to mention. Let us say, it will not happen.
We're running out of time, Ambassador.
Okay, if Egypt falls in the hands of Islamists, it will not happen probably. It will be a catastrophe, a disaster for Israel, for Egypt, and for Europe, because there will be 20 million more refugees to Europe. They should understand it.
Unfortunately, we don't have more time to discuss this fascinating topic with you, Ambassador. Thanks so much for joining us, Sweet Mazel.
You're welcome.
Minister of Sports and Culture Miri Regev submitted her controversial Loyalty in Culture legislation to the Knesset Education Committee today. If amended, the bill will enhance her ministry's power and allow it to condition funding for institutions, theaters, and artists according to their allegiance to their state and respect for its symbols. Speaking to reporters, Regev said she wants to make a single amendment that will allow her ministry to withhold funding to any institution or artist that defaces the flag or other national symbols, incites racism, violence, or terror. Well, getting a job in Israel is not always easy for immigrants, since they often lack the connections needed to break in. But yesterday, there was a multilingual job fair aimed at foreign language speakers, and it drew a huge crowd. Dozens of employers from top Israeli companies set up tables at the Tel Aviv Cinematheque to recruit new immigrants. Headhunters said they were seeking skilled native speakers who understand varied languages and cultures.
Israel is one of the best countries because of its cultural melting pot to get high quality personnel, because we're working in the financial markets, which means if you talk on the phone to someone about these kind of details, you will want to be talking or spoken to with your mother tongue, right? We have high quality people. I think we already have above 50 CVs. Most of them, as far as I gathered, are academic.
This is where we actually get very professional people. We're mainly looking for a lot of language speakers, and this is actually a lot of people come from Argentina, from France, from South Africa, like myself. This is what we do. We hire a lot of language speakers because we're dealing with the international markets.
For me it is important. I've been a freelancer photographer for 10 years, 12 years. So entering the field to make some additional income or some another field is what it's all about for me.
In Israel, a lot of people get jobs because of who they know, protexia. And as an immigrant, you don't have that, do you?
I had once a girlfriend who had protexia for me. And that didn't work out because I found a job in the meantime all by myself. So it works both ways. I know the good sides of protexia, I know the bad sides of it.
I don't even know what the job descriptions are.
Okay, what about you, John?
Yeah, well, even though the people are very friendly and nice here, you know, it's kind of like they're offering a lot of similar jobs between them. So there's not a lot of variety. Like if you need I don't know, like we're musicians and we're looking kind of like for part-time work, maybe things that we can do, continue playing music and do, you know. And a lot of them are looking for full-time and they're looking for sales and marketing and or trading online, you know. So it's very specific things. If you don't have that yeda, if you don't have the knowledge, it's hard to like offer yourself for the job. But you know.
Well, you got to keep an open mind in this world. And,
I think the Shabak had like a box there, so I put my info in there. I could be a spy.
Stock Talk now. Share prices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange were up across the board, and the shekel was mixed in foreign currency trading. Let's take a look at the late afternoon numbers. And the weather now. Tomorrow is expected to be partly cloudy and still cold. There's a chance of frost in parts of the country tonight. Here are the forecasted highs and lows at home and abroad for the next 24 hours. But that's all for today. I'll be back again at this desk tomorrow to bring you the latest news from Israel. Until then, I am Ariel O'Sullivan. Thanks for watching, and shalom from Jerusalem.